In the quiet night of a small house in the suburbs of Hanoi, sighs were like sharp knives cutting into people's hearts. The night wind blew through the open window, swaying the thin white curtains, but not enough to dispel the cold that was enveloping the small room. Beside the wooden cradle near the window, Minh lay still, as quiet as a shadow. There was no cry for his mother, no small legs flailing like other children, only a creepy silence. The little boy's black, flickering eyes blinked continuously, as if he was trying to find something in the darkness, but his legs remained motionless. Tam, Minh's mother, sat next to the cradle, her hands trembling on the wooden frame. She felt her throat tighten, as if an invisible stone was pressing down on her chest. Just 3 months ago, everything was normal. Minh was a healthy, smart baby who loved to laugh and dance whenever he heard music from the small speaker in the house. Tam still clearly remembers the afternoons when she carried Minh out to the yard, sang lullabies under the banyan tree, and watched his little feet kicking in the air. Yet in just a short time, everything changed. She could never forget that fateful morning. That day, like every other day, Tam put Minh on the bed to change his diaper after he had just woken up. But when she took off his clothes, she felt a cold air running down her spine. Minh's little white and pink feet were no longer kicking around like usual. They lay still, motionless. "Minh, kick your feet for me to see, baby," Tam coaxed her baby, trying to smile to dispel the worry that had just begun to grow in her heart. Minh just looked at his mother, his eyes clear and bewildered, but there was no reaction at all. She tried to gently shake his feet, but they were still stiff, lifeless. Hung, Tam's husband, had just entered the room, saw his wife's bewildered expression, and quickly asked, "What's wrong?" Tam trembled and replied, "Look, it seems like Minh isn't kicking anymore." Hung looked down at his son, frowning. "He's probably still sleepy," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. Tam wanted to believe her husband, but all day long, Minh didn't move. She put her hand on the sole of his foot, tickling him gently like always, but there was no reaction. The vague fear in her heart gradually turned into a fierce wave, sweeping away all hope. The next morning, Tam and Hung took Minh to the hospital. The air in the waiting room was filled with footsteps, whispers, and the rattling of medical carts. But for the couple, everything seemed suffocated, leaving only the excitement rising to their throats. When the doctor called Minh's name, they held hands tightly as they walked into the examination room, not expecting that this moment would change their lives forever. After a series of tests, MRI scans, and electromyography, the doctor sighed, put the file on the table, and looked straight at them. "You need to prepare yourself," he said, his voice heavy. Tam's hands clenched so tightly that their knuckles turned white. "Minh has muscular dystrophy." Each word felt like a punch to their chests. Hung spoke up, his voice hoarse. "What is this disease, doctor?" "It's a rare disorder," the doctor explained, "which causes the muscles to become increasingly weak. Minh has lost the motor reflexes in his legs. Over time, this condition may spread to his arms." Tam was stunned, her mind blank. "No, it can't be. Minh is still healthy. We've been taking good care of him. Why is he like this?" She almost screamed, tears streaming uncontrollably. The doctor looked at them with sympathy. "I understand that it is difficult for you to accept, but this is a genetic disease, not a disease caused by care or nutrition. Currently, there is no cure. However, you can apply physical therapy to help your child maintain muscle." Those words were like a death sentence, extinguishing all the light in Tam's heart. There was no cure. Her son, the child who used to smile when his mother rocked him, now faced a future where he could not walk. On the way home, Tam held Minh tightly to her chest, feeling the small warmth from his body, but her heart was so cold that she could not breathe. Hung drove in silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. No one said a word to each other, but they both knew. From today, their lives would never be the same. Since receiving the bad news, the atmosphere in the house changed completely. Tam no longer smiled. She hovered around Minh, every day placing her hands on his legs, hoping for a miracle to make them move again, but nothing happened. Hung tried to act strong in front of his wife, but every night when Minh was asleep, he quietly went to the balcony, lit a cigarette, and looked far away into the night. The flickering flame on the cigarette was the only light in those moments. The conversations between the couple gradually became less frequent. The meals on the table were cold. No one bothered to eat. They exchanged silent glances, but no one dared to say what was really in their hearts. Does Minh still have a chance? Is there a miracle for him? Tam no longer believed in that. She had prayed, had hoped, but with each passing day, that hope became more fragile, like a candle about to go out in the wind, until one day when a surprise guest appeared at their door. Tam's cousin appeared at the door with a large paper box in her hand. Her smile was as bright as the sunshine in the middle of winter, but Tam was in no mood to accept anything. She stood still in front of the door, her hands tightly gripping the wooden frame, as if she let go, her whole body would collapse. The past few days had worn her down to the point of exhaustion. Every night she stayed up all night, looking at her son lying motionless in the crib, wondering why fate was so cruel. "Sister Tam, open the door!" Ha's voice rang out, bright and full of energy. Tam replied hoarsely, "Ha, I'm not in the mood." But Ha didn't pay attention to her sister's lethargy. She walked into the house and put the box on the tiled floor. Suddenly, the cardboard box moved slightly, and then a small bark rang out. A tiny head with shiny golden fur peeked out from the edge of the box, its round black eyes flickering as it looked at Tam curiously. "You keep it," Ha said, her voice encouraging. Tam frowned. "A puppy?" She didn't have the time nor the energy to take care of another living being. "You have enough to worry about. Minh hasn't even—" Before Tam could finish her sentence, Ha interrupted her, grabbing her hand. "I know, but I also know that just something new, a reason to smile, even just a little, will make you feel different. You don't have to accept it, but at least try it. Maybe it will bring you something you didn't expect." Tam looked down at the puppy, which was walking clumsily on the floor. It occasionally sniffed and licked its nose, looking innocent and carefree. To Tam, it didn't seem like anything that could change her life. It was just a small dog, unaware of the pain she was enduring. But Ha's hopeful eyes made it impossible for her to refuse right away. "Okay, if it stays, I'll keep it," she sighed. Ha smiled, sat down, and petted the dog. "I won't regret it." She named it Lucky, left a small bowl and bag of kibble on the table, and left. Tam watched Lucky wander around at her feet, her heart empty. She didn't know how to feel about this sudden appearance. That evening, when Hung returned, he was surprised to see Lucky running around the house. "What is this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "A gift from Ha. Its name is Lucky," Tam replied, her voice faint. Hung was momentarily surprised. He didn't think his wife would agree to adopt an animal in this situation, but seeing that Tam didn't say anything more, he didn't ask anymore. That night's dinner continued in the usual silence, except that there was a small creature sneaking under the table, occasionally snuggling up to Hung's feet as if looking for a safe place. When Tam put Minh to bed, she noticed that Lucky wasn't running around like this afternoon. It tiptoed to the crib, lightly touched its nose to the wooden bar, then obediently lay down next to Minh, its round eyes staring at the boy intently. Tam squinted to observe. Lucky was still a puppy, less than 2 months old, but it was unlike any other puppy she had seen. It didn't bark loudly, didn't jump around demandingly, just lay there, strangely quiet, as if it understood that this place needed silence. She gently placed her hand on Lucky's head, feeling the soft warmth from its golden fur. "What do you think of it?" Hung asked from behind. Tam shook his head. "Not sure yet, but at least it doesn't bother him." Hung nodded slightly, not saying anything more. The next morning, when Minh woke up, Lucky was still lying right next to him like a loyal friend. Min's small hands unconsciously reached out, gently touching Lucky's soft fur. The dog was startled, but didn't run away. It just wagged its tail lightly, then rested its head on the crate, continuing to observe Minh. Tam stood outside, holding her breath, watching the scene before her eyes. Minh had never reacted to any of the toys she had placed around him, but now, even though it was just an unconscious movement, the boy reached out his hand. It was just a small movement, but to Tam, it was enough to make her heart flutter. For the first time after so many days of being immersed in despair, a small ray of hope crept into her mind. She didn't dare to think too much, didn't dare to dream of a miracle, but maybe, just maybe, everything wasn't completely over. Lucky quickly became an indispensable part of the family's life, but not in the way Tam had expected. She had always thought that a puppy would be a nuisance, barking loudly, biting, and destroying things, but Lucky was completely different. He did not run around, did not demand attention. Instead, he had only one concern: Minh. Every morning, when Minh woke up, Lucky would curl up next to the crib, his round eyes observing every little movement of the boy. If Minh fell asleep, he would quietly rest his head on the crib bar, not leaving even for a minute. Tam noticed these actions, and an indescribable feeling crept into her heart. A puppy less than 2 months old, yet he had such strange patience. He was not just a pet, but more like a friend, a silent protector beside her son. Once, while changing Minh's diaper, Tam accidentally dropped a towel on the floor. Before she could bend down to pick it up, Lucky nimbly bit it, wagged its tail, and placed it right next to her. Tam was stunned. "Little boy, do you know how to help?" she whispered. Lucky did not answer, just tilted his head to look at her, his eyes clear as if he was thinking. Hung also gradually realized something special about Lucky. One time, when Minh suddenly cried out in discomfort, Lucky immediately stood up, walked closer to the crib, and gently touched his nose to his hand, as if to comfort him. "You see," Hung whispered to Tam late one night as they sat on the sofa watching Lucky and Minh. "It seems to know Minh needs it." Tam did not answer, but she knew her husband was right. Lucky was not an ordinary dog. The bond between Minh and Lucky was becoming more and more obvious. Even though Minh could not move as much as other children, his eyes when looking at Lucky were much brighter. If before, Minh just lay still, indifferent to everything around him. Now, every time Lucky came near, his eyes would follow it, his little fingers moving slightly as if trying to reach for his golden-furred friend. One afternoon when Tam was washing dishes in the kitchen, she heard Hung calling softly, "Tam, come here." His voice was strange, urgent, but not panicked. Tam wiped her hands, hurriedly ran to the living room. When she arrived, the scene before her eyes made her freeze. Lucky was lying next to the crib, like every day, but this time, Minh was not just looking at it. The little boy reached out his little hand, his fingers lightly touching Lucky's hand. Tam's heart clenched. She rushed over, kneeling down beside the bed. Minh, did you just move?" Min's tiny hand was still on Lucky's, although weak, but it was a real movement, not an unconscious reflex, not a random muscle twitch. Tam turned to Hung, her eyes wide open. He was also stunned. Lucky didn't seem surprised. He just lay there obediently, wagging his tail gently, as if he had always known this moment would come. Tam put her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. How long had it been since she'd seen such a clear change in Minh? How long had she been waiting for a sign, however small, that her son still had hope? She touched Min's hand, helping him hold Lucky. The tiny fingers moved a little more. A small movement, but to Tam it was a miracle. Hung knelt down beside her, looking at Minh and then at Lucky. Maybe our child still has a chance," he whispered. For the first time in months, a ray of real hope was kindled in their hearts. Night fell. The Hanoi sky twinkled with dim stars. A gentle wind blew through the window, carrying the cool breath of winter. In the small room, Tam and Hung sat quietly on the sofa, their hands clasped together, watching Minh and Lucky on the bed by the window. Minh was still lying there as usual, but this time the boy's eyes were no longer fixed on the ceiling. They were looking at Lucky, shining in the dark. The little dog lay curled up next to the kennel, his breath coming and going gently. But tonight, Lucky seemed different. He did not sleep peacefully as usual. The little ears perked up. It raised its head, looking at Minh as if it was hearing something that humans couldn't feel. Then suddenly, it stood up, ran around Min's bed, its little feet lightly stepping on the tiled floor, but without any carefree playfulness. "What's wrong with Lucky?" Hung whispered. Tam squinted to observe. Lucky walked up to Minh, put his two little feet on the edge of the crib, leaned towards the boy, and groaned softly. It wasn't lying still like usual. It was trying to wake Minh up. Tam opened her eyes wide. A chill ran down her spine. Hung also sat up, looking more closely. "Lucky," Tam called softly, but the dog didn't turn around. It only focused on Minh. Then suddenly, Lucky lifted one foot, gently touching the boy's little hand, and at that moment, a miracle happened. Min's tiny fingers twitched slightly. Tam's heart beat strongly. She rushed towards the bed. "Hung, you're moving." Hung was stunned, looking at Minh, then at Lucky. The boy's hand, which had been stiff for months, moved. Lucky continued to touch Min's hand with his nose, gently licking the tip of his finger, and then Minh moved again, a small twitch, but more clearly. Slender fingers tried to grasp Lucky's soft fur. Tears welled up in Tam's eyes. She didn't dare blink, afraid that this was just an illusion. But Hung grabbed her shoulders, his hands trembling. I saw it! Minh moved again. This time the boy's whole hand lifted slightly, albeit very weakly. Lucky wagged his tail, jumped onto the bed, and licked Min's cheek lightly. A small, weak, but real laugh came from the boy's mouth. The room, which had been accustomed to silence for months, was suddenly filled with a heartbreakingly clear sound. Tam burst into tears, hugging Hung tightly. She couldn't believe what she was witnessing. Her son, the baby that the doctor had said would never move, had just raised his hand. And all it took to wake him up was not medicine, not machines, but a loyal little dog who loved Minh with all his heart. Lucky wasn't surprised at all. He just looked at Minh, his tail wagging continuously, as if he had always believed that this moment would come. Tam sat blankly by Min's bed, tears still hot on her cheeks. She didn't dare take her eyes off her son's small hand, the hand that had just moved after months of being motionless. Hung knelt beside him, his trembling hands touching Min's arm, his heart still beating strongly after witnessing the miracle that had just happened. Lucky lay next to Minh, his little tail wagging continuously, his eyes sparkling as if he knew he had just performed a miracle. It moved closer, touching his nose to Min's hand again. And as a natural reflex, the boy's hand moved slightly, trying to grasp Lucky's soft fur. Tam held her breath. This time, Minh didn't just lift his hand. The boy's eyes lit up. His lips moved slightly. A weak sound rang out in the quiet night. "Lou!" Hung was startled, his eyes opened wide. Tam seemed frozen in place. She couldn't believe her ears. Minh opened his mouth again. It was just a very soft whisper, but both husband and wife heard it clearly. Minh had just called Lucky's name. The boy not only moved, but also spoke. Tam was overwhelmed. She didn't know if she was crying or laughing anymore. Lucky barked softly, rushed to lick Min's cheek, his tail wagging wildly as if he was cheering. Minh smiled, a weak but radiant smile, his lips rosier than after months of silence and lifelessness. Hung couldn't control himself, hugged Tam tightly, his emotions exploding. "Did you hear that? Minh just said it. Minh called Lucky." Tam Tam nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Minh told you. She had never felt so grateful in her life. The doctors had said that Minh might lose his ability to move, even affecting his communication, but now her son not only moved, but also called out his little friend's name. At that moment, Tam knew that a miracle had truly happened. That night, Tam and Hung did not sleep. They sat next to Minh, holding his tiny hand, feeling every single movement. Every twitch of a finger, every soft laugh became a miracle. They were no longer afraid, no longer feeling helpless like before. They were witnessing a revival. Lucky was still lying next to Minh, resting his head on his leg, breathing softly. He did not bark, did not make any noise, just remained silent as if he always knew Minh needed him. Hung looked at Lucky, his voice hoarse with emotion. Tam, we have to tell the doctor. Tam nodded immediately. They had lost too much time in despair, and now they could not afford to delay another moment. The next morning, soft sunlight poured through the window, shining into the small room. For the first time in months, Tam felt real warmth. She dressed Minh, adjusting each small button, her heart filled with faith. Hung stood by the door, his eyes shining. Today will be a new day, he said. Tam smiled. That's right. They took Minh to the hospital, not to hear bad news this time, but to prove that miracles really do exist. Lucky was also brought along, lying obediently in Hung's arms. Dr. Fung, who was in charge of Minh's treatment, noticed the strange expressions on the couple's faces as soon as she entered. She put the file on the table, her eyes gentle but cautious. Do you two have any news to tell me, right? Tam took a deep breath, put Minh down on the chair, and gently picked up her son's hand. Doctor, Minh can move now. Dr. Fung's eyes wavered slightly. Move? Hung nodded, his voice full of pride. Not just his hands, but his feet too, and my son told me. Dr. Fung blinked, clearly not believing him right away. Let me check. She took the small pen and touched Minh's palm. He looked down, slowly flexing his fingers, a completely conscious reflex. Tam's heart pounded in his chest. The doctor moved on to check Minh's feet, gently touching the soles of his feet. The boy blinked, his feet twitching slightly. Tam held his breath. Hung was stunned. Dr. Foon was completely surprised. She ordered a series of tests. Minh was taken to the physical therapy room, where doctors measured his nerve reflexes and assessed his motor abilities. For more than an hour, Tam and Hung waited anxiously outside. Finally, Dr. Foon came out, a rare smile on her lips. I can't believe it, she said slowly, her voice filled with admiration. The results show that Minh is really recovering. Tam exhaled, her hands clutching her chest. Hong squeezed his wife's hand. The doctor continued. Based on what we've seen, Minh is slowly regaining his motor reflexes. He may have started to recover slowly over time, but a recent psychological shock has accelerated the process. She looked down at Lucky, the puppy still lying obediently in Hung's arms. And I think Lucky is the one who caused that shock. Tam clenched her fists. She'd believed this for a long time, but hearing the doctor confirm it made her heart burst. We'll continue with physical therapy now, Dr. Fung said. But with his current condition, I believe Minh has a chance to walk again in the future. Tam burst into tears. Hung turned away, his eyes red. They had thought they had lost their child, had accepted a dark future. But today that future had changed. Since the day the doctor confirmed that Minh was recovering, the whole family seemed to have been breathed new life. Tam and Hung took Minh to physical therapy more often. Each session was a challenge. Minh was still weak, his movements slow and tiring, but he was no longer afraid. And the main reason was Lucky. Whenever Minh was discouraged, Lucky would wag his tail, jump up beside him, and gently place his head on his lap as a silent encouragement. If Minh practiced reaching out, Lucky patiently stood still to let him touch. If Minh practiced kicking his legs, Lucky ran back and forth as if to cheer him on. The doctors had never seen such a case before. They gradually realized that Lucky was more than just a friendly dog. He understood Minh, sensed when he was discouraged, and always found ways to encourage him. One afternoon, when Minh was practicing leg lifts, Tam sat next to him, her heart aching when she saw that he was tired. She almost wanted to tell him to stop, but Lucky acted first. He touched his nose to Minh's foot, then ran away a little, turned around, and waited. Minh watched, his eyes wavering slightly. Lucky barked softly, wagged his tail as if to encourage him. Try one more time, you can do it. Minh pursed his lips, lifted his leg once more, and this time he did it. And the whole room burst into cheers. Dr. Fung nodded in satisfaction. I've never seen such great motivation from a dog. Tam burst into tears, but this time they were tears of joy. Every day, Minh improved a little. From small movements, he began to sit up without help. Then he held onto a chair to stand. The first time Minh stood for a moment, Lucky happily jumped around him, running around like a happy child. Tam knelt down, hugged her son tightly, and whispered, "My son did it." That afternoon, the sky was blue. The sunlight gently covered the porch. Minh sat on a small chair, his tiny legs swinging gently. He was no longer the motionless child lying still on the bed. The months of practice, the drops of sweat, the moments of seeming hopelessness, all gave way to a miracle. Lucky was always by Minh's side. When he tried to stand, he sat next to him, his eyes watching intently. If he walked, he slowed down, careful not to run too fast so Minh wouldn't lose his balance. For Minh, every step was a challenge, but he was no longer afraid. He knew that whenever he fell, Lucky would always be there, waiting and cheering. Hung sat outside, reading the newspaper and glancing at his son. Minh was playing with Lucky like any other day. But then, something miraculous happened. Minh let go of the chair, his eyes sparkling with determination. Hung stopped. Minh lifted a foot. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. No one caught him. Hung jumped up, his heart pounding. Tam, come out here, he shouted. Tam rushed out of the kitchen, the spoon falling to the floor. She was stunned to see Minh walking, really walking, without anyone's help. Mom, I can walk, Minh exclaimed, his face glowing with joy. Tam covered her mouth, tears streaming uncontrollably. Hung opened his arms wide. Come on, son. Come here to daddy. Minh looked at his father, looked at Lucky. The dog barked a small sound as if to encourage him. Minh walked forward, slowly but determinedly, and fell into Hung's arms. He lifted his son up, hugged him tightly, tears falling into Minh's soft hair. Tam rushed forward, hugging both father and son. Lucky barked and ran around them, happy as a child. At that moment, the whole family truly stepped out of the darkness. That night, Minh slept soundly in his mother's arms. Lucky lay beside him, breathing softly, his tail wagging softly in his dream. Tam stroked Minh's hair, turned to look at Hung. Do you think if Lucky hadn't been there, things would have been different? Hung was silent for a moment, then shook his head. No, Lucky is not just a dog. He is the miracle we've been waiting for. Tam squeezed her husband's hand. I never believed in miracles, but now I do. Hung smiled softly. Me too. They had lost all hope, thinking they would never see their son walk again. But then Lucky came, not with a spell, not with a supernatural miracle, but with love, patience, and absolute loyalty. Minh still had a long way to go, but one thing was certain. No matter what happened, Lucky would always be by his side. And thanks to Lucky, the boy learned to walk on his own 2 feet. The lesson of this story is simple but profound. Sometimes miracles do not come from far-fetched miracles. They come from love, from loyalty, from small but persistent actions every day. They come from a friend who is always there, never abandoning us, even when we have lost all hope. And sometimes a small dog can change a life. The story of Minh and Lucky is not only a child's miraculous recovery journey, but also a testament to the power of love, patience, and hope. Life is full of challenges, but with a companion, a little encouragement at the right time, and unwavering faith, miracles will happen. Please share your thoughts by liking, leaving a comment below, and subscribing to the channel to continue accompanying us in the next meaningful stories. Once again, we sincerely thank you. We wish you and your family good health, happiness, and love.